Hello everybody, as Project. Now we are here today at Vineplace Sports and Performance, and Dave, a good friend of mine, has very kindly let me do a test drive and review video on this absolutely gorgeous Subaru Legacy Twin Turbo GTB E-Tune. Oh yes, it's an E-Tune. I'm going to talk to you about the differences between a normal GTB and a GTB E-Tune. We'll go through the performance, interior, what it's like to drive. But yep, this is it. Absolutely stunning. And if I'm honest with you, I'm not going to lie, I've actually owned about 3 or 4 of these cars, and I have a funny feeling I am going to fall back in love with a Subaru Legacy. And my wife did warn us about this. So yeah, if I come home with a Subaru Legacy GTB E-Tune, please. It was a moment of weakness. Now, I've actually owned 3 of these cars. I've owned a early Gen 2 wagon twin turbo, and I've owned a B4 RSK saloon, and I've also owned what they call the GTB DC. All 3 of them were absolutely amazing. Just going to go through some of the specs on this car. 276 horsepower as per the JDM, Japanese Gentleman's Agreement. So if I'm honest with you, I always felt like they were a little bit more than 276 horsepower. I think they were, for me, I think these felt like about a 300 horsepower car. I'm not gonna lie, they literally did feel like a 300 horsepower car. They drive beautifully, and this option here in this car is the manual box. Now, the automatic, the old slushmatic, automatic, whatever it was, they did sort of go well with the twin turbos. I'm not gonna lie, they really did. The twin turbos had the torque, and with it being this 2-stage turbo, so you've got 2 turbos, and those 2 turbos, one kicks in between a certain RPM and then ends at a certain RPM, and then there's like a 500 RPM gap where the other turbo then kicks in. It's quick. It's very quick. Yeah, so that's a 2-stage twin turbo on this car. But it worked. It really did. It worked. And obviously the Subaru Legacy has that rally pedigree, because obviously, you know, Subaru started their rally journey in, I think it was called the Subaru Leon or something like that. And then the real rally car was actually the Legacy RS, which came along in 1989 and did the World Rally Championship. Obviously never won any titles, but that sort of, you know, paved the way for the future WRC, where, you know, Colin McRae with the Subaru Impreza, you know, they did championships, they won championships. The Legacy RS era of WRC was where ProDrive actually got into the cars and went, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And like I said, you know, the Legacy RS never really won any championships, but it was the hero's car, and then that sort of drove the Impreza to sort of go with that. And like I said, Legacies, I think they look fantastic. And this thing, I'm not gonna lie, it is absolutely massive inside. There is so much headroom in here. I'm 5'10", I'm a chunky lad, and the seats are nice and comfortable. They're not too slouchy. You know, you feel like you do get a good support. You get like a bit of a luxurious feel because it was half leather with cloth and stuff like that. And the GTB, although it had Bilstein dampers, and a lot of people go, did the Bilstein dampers hinder the ride? Is it any less comfortable? And considering I've owned a GTB DC before, not at all. Not at all. I think that the GTB, the Bilstein dampers, are absolutely sublime. They really, really are. They're absolutely spot on. And the handling on this car, I mean, please remember, it is a 21-year-old car, I think it is, or 20 years old. I think this is a 2002 actually, so it's a 20-year-old car, the Revision D E-Tune. And if I'm honest with you, this thing handles like an Impreza. It's so agile. It's a big wagon, and this thing handles like a Subaru Impreza. I'm going on some open roads, and then you're going to join me later on. So you rejoin me, and I am on some twisty roads, which is where the Subaru Legacy GTB really does belong. Some of these corners I'm going in far too quick, and if I'm honest with you, it just doesn't seem to be phased. It really doesn't seem to be phased. I mean, literally. And I'm not even braking, it's like they are so agile and so precise. The steering on this thing is so connected to eTune. GTB eTune is probably one of the best model Subaru Legacies you can buy. And do you know what it is? Great investment. And I use that word lightly because I'm in the trade where investments in cars is a plus side of things, but people in their cars as investment purposes, you know what it is, they don't drive them. And cars like this should be driven. You can probably pick up an eTune fresh import from Japan for about £10,000, and a lot of people will go, £10,000 is a ridiculous amount of money for a car that's 20 years old and a Subaru. I completely disagree. I absolutely completely disagree. I feel a GTB eTune is superb value for money. It drives beautifully. It handles brilliantly. And I'm not being funny. The sound from that twin turbo. Oh yes. It really does drive phenomenal, this thing. Sounds absolutely glorious. That flat 4 Boxer sounds absolutely breathtaking. Not too loud, not overly loud. Remember, this is a stock car, and it's really, really rare to find one in like stock example. Really, I think the only thing that's had done to this car is the wheels, which are these beautiful bronze raised wheels. And I honestly do think that they suit the white bodywork so nicely, so nicely. It just goes. What an absolute stomper this car is, honestly. Like, I'm falling back in love with owning a Legacy just from driving this car. 5 minutes I've been driving this car, and I'm like, God, I want another one. I want another one. My wife was right. She's always right. I want another one. I think, for me, the Subaru, this is the thinking man Subaru. The Impreza, beautiful car. I've owned Imprezas before. But do you know what it is? It's a different feeling from the Impreza. While the Impreza has quite a violent response, especially like if it's a modified car. But even factory, they still had that like really push you back in the back of your seats. These, with it being a 5-speed box and the twin turbo setup, they really do have that long-legged capability. So I'm going to explain the difference on the GTB eTune now. Obviously normal GTB around about the same horsepower, 276, 280 horsepower. The GTB eTune, I believe, had a slightly different turbo setup. So the turbo setup on the GTB eTune was a VF32 and a VF33, and the ratio on the gearbox slightly taller. So yeah, it really did make the whole driving experience a little bit more sharper, less lag, because the twin turbo Legacies do suffer with what they call the VOD, which is called the Valley of Death, which is that 500 RPM rev range where the primary turbo shuts down and the secondary turbo comes in, which is where the 2-stage turbo setup actually is on this car. So yeah, like I said, they do actually drive a lot different from a normal GTB if you've driven a GTB. Like I have, and I've driven obviously I've driven GTB DCs, I've driven RSKB 4 saloons, you know, so I do actually know what I'm talking about regarding Subaru Legacies, because I have owned a fair few of them. Obviously with the E-Tune, it came in on a revision day, so you'll probably see on the front you've got different headlamps, slightly different body kits, and I believe on the E-Tune you had the 4-pot calipers on the front and the 2-pot calipers on the rear as standard, which you wouldn't normally get on a GTB. That was specially reserved for E-Tune, E-Tune 2, and the S-Tune, I believe. Could be called the S-Tune, I'm not too sure, I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, like I said, you did notice a difference, and I do notice a difference in GTB Legacy, but you can just tell that this is such a sharper car to what the original GTB was, and that's the difference. And for me, GTB, just buy a GTB E-Tune. If you're going to buy one of these, go the full hog and buy a GTB E-Tune. It is absolutely superb. Everything about this car is just absolutely amazing. Now, I have to say a massive thanks to Dave Rowe, a good friend of mine. He owns Vineplace Sports and Performance, and he's been in the game since 1988. And on top of my head, that's, what's it, 32 years? 32 years game. We're going to have a little look around of some of his showroom stock. He's very, very big in the Elgrand community and the Toyota Alphard community. And if I'm honest with you, what he's doing with those big Japanese domestic buses, he's created them into camper vans, and they're absolutely amazing. The quality of the work with them getting converted at Vineplace into camper vans is second to none, and that is why he is so popular and the best at what he does. Thanks very much, Mr. Rowe from Vineplace. I'd just like to end this video now. If you haven't already liked, shared and subscribed, please do so. It really is going to help us build the channel. I've got so much more coming to the channel, and I've also got so much more JDM cars, and I've got a lot of people who are already saying to us, as if you want to borrow me car, do a review on it. That's my project, this is my project. Yeah, please do like, share and subscribe, and I shall see you later. Cheers out, bye bye.